You are now listening to The Unwavering, the movement dedicated to educating and empowering the brave men and women who have or are still serving our great nation. Thank you guys so much for joining us for Season 2. This episode, I talked to a good friend of ours who's going to give us some brief insight as to some of the experiences he went through and what his journey was like going through the Air Force. But before we begin, as always, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you guys who are currently serving or have given your time in the past to serve our nation. It's truly a blessing to be able to speak to you guys, to connect, and hopefully be able to help you and your families. So thank you again for everything that you do. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to my buddy Sean and let him introduce himself.
Sean Busby, served in the Air Force for just under 12 years, separated about 2 years ago now. When I joined, I was an aircraft mechanic, and then I retrained to being a flight engineer.
That's so cool. You guys have the title engineer already. Yeah. For us, our highest title is like technician or quality assurance, which is a story for another day. But hey, thank you, Sean, so much for joining us. I know you are a few hours ahead being on East Coast time, so thanks for calling in, taking the time out of your day to give us this episode and this interview. The reason why I wanted to talk to you specifically is I love hearing why people joined and kind of their journey. You can literally have two of the exact same upbringings and environments, but completely different outcomes. So everybody has their own story to tell. Everyone has different experiences. And I kind of wanted to get some of the things that you went through, things that were positive during your time in, things that you wish you would have done differently, what you think is important for them either wanting to join or once they get out, how they set themselves up for success. So with that being said, what was kind of your motivation for joining the military, the Air Force specifically?
I went to a automotive tech school after I got out of high school in Mooresville, North Carolina. Supposed to get hired at a Ford dealership, and then they abruptly called me and said the guy that hired me was fired and we don't need you. So at that point, I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And having grown up in the military, I knew the lifestyle. And so I was like, well, I've always wanted to serve my country. From the advice of my father, who was in the Marine Corps, he said, go to Air Force. And didn't really want to go to college. That wasn't really the thing for me. I'm more of a hands-on technical person. So then that's kind of why I chose the career fields in the Air Force that I did.
When you went in, I know for myself, I took the ASVAB. I scored well enough to be able to choose what I wanted to do when I joined. Was that the same thing? Or when you signed, did you just sign an open contract allowing them to choose what job you got?
No, I chose aircraft mechanic. I had done the automotive training, but I've always been into aviation, so I wanted to go that route. But yeah, I took the ASVAB, scored well enough that I was able to choose what I wanted, and I chose aircraft mechanic, and then took the ASVAB again later while I was in the military so I could retrain.
Do you think, and the reason I ask this is because, I do know your family and stuff like that, but do you think having your father who served in the military for such a long period of time and your mom who was very active in the military lifestyle, do you think them being able to be there and guide you help put you on a path? Because I know, like, for me, when I joined, this is going to sound stupid to all you listeners, but no lie, when I went to the recruiter's office for the very first time, they said, okay, what do you want to do? And I'm like, what do you mean? What do I want to do? I want to join the Marines, infantry, duh. And they're like, we do a lot more than just infantry. And I'm not even making this up. I literally thought the Navy goes out on ships. They do their thing. The Air Force flies and they do all aviation. The Marine Corps goes and they're on the ground. Same thing with the Army, so that was like my mindset going into it. It's pretty embarrassing to tell, but that's honestly what I thought. So when I went in and I tested and I scored, they said, hey, have you thought about aviation? So for me, right at the beginning, I had that person in my life that taught me to think big picture, and they were there to tell me, yes, you can do infantry and that's great if you want to do that, but have you thought about what you want to do when you leave the military? And I'm like, no, I never thought about that. So they recommended me getting into aviation. Do you think it was kind of the same mindset? Your parents were trying to set you up for success in the long run? And was that advice that you're grateful for now?
Oh, yeah. I'm grateful for all the advice that my father and mother have given me throughout the years. And having my father have been in Marine Corps aviation, I grew up around that, and seeing that side of it just made me want to do the aviation side in the Air Force. Like you said, Air Force, you think aviation, they fly. There's lots of other jobs in the Air Force that you could do that's not aviation related, but I wanted to do aviation. And that's just stuck with me through my time in the Air Force, going from fixing the airplanes to actually being on them while flying and managing all the systems as a flight engineer. And then sometime after I got out, eventually getting back into the aviation field and the job that I'm doing now.
That's awesome. For everyone that's listening to this, it's just so crucial for you to set yourself up. Anytime I try and give people advice, I always try and tell them, don't think about the instant gratification or what comes tomorrow. Think about 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And I'm so glad that I had that person that was there to say, hey, you know what? Why don't you think about aviation? Because now where I'm at, it's all directly related to that one incident, that one person who took the time to guide me. So if you guys are listening, if you want to do infantry, all the power in the world to you. I would never say don't do it. I'm just saying if you have the option and you like aviation or you like the medical field and you want to go be a corpsman in the Navy or you want to be a Navy doctor or an Army doctor, take advantage of your time in the military. It's there to utilize your hard work to accomplish a mission, but at the same time, take advantage of it and set yourself up for success. If you have the opportunity, study for these tests, take them seriously because it's just going to open more doors for you in the future. So that's one of the most important pieces of advice I can give right now is just take that seriously. And like Sean said, if you test and you hit a certain score, but later throughout your military career, you decide, hey, I want to test and get a higher score, or hey, I want to go ahead and get my college degree so I can become an officer. Continue to educate yourselves, make yourselves more well-rounded because it's going to open more opportunities to you. Working alongside your dad and, spending so much time with your family, they were always teaching me to think bigger picture, which now I'm super grateful for because it's just made my life that much easier and I've been able to accomplish much more than I ever imagined. So if you're listening, thank you guys so much. But moving forward, so the Air Force, can you kind of describe when you went in, what their focus was, what you think they did well to set you up for the future? For anyone that's listening and thinking about joining the Air Force, what were things that you liked about it and you think could help others who are planning to join?
So when I got to my first duty station, which was Herbert Field, Florida, which is in the panhandle of Florida and over by Destin and Fort Walton Beach, the supervisors that I had, they were great. When I got there, they were like, we're not going to deploy you immediately. You need to learn your job. You need to get the skills so that you can be a valuable asset in the combat zone and taking care of the airplanes and making sure that they're running good. Once I retrained as a flight engineer and got to Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City, it was kind of the same thing. The first squadron was good. My second squadron, when I became an instructor, that was more of a family because there was very few of us. There wasn't a lot of flight deck people, so we were all more of a family knit there. But my last job in the Air Force, in the operations group, that was where the word family was really big. I was the only flight engineer. There was 2 pilots, 1 navigator, and then 1 of all the other crew positions on the airplane. And we always had meetings in the morning. We would close the shop down once every week to go do team building. And so we always had going aways, and it was a true family. And there, the people that I worked with, they really helped set me up for when I did get out, because that's the job that I had when I did separate.
Before we get to family, because that is definitely the thing that I'm the most grateful for, being a member of the armed forces, but you mentioned a few things that in my mind are huge. I briefly touched on it earlier, but the fact that they give you that title engineer, a lot of you guys who are listening to this may not realize just how impactful that is, but these titles, they actually do mean something. When you get out and you join the civilian workforce, if you are able to come into a job and say, hey, I was in the Air Force, I served with these squadrons, I was an avionics technician for this many years, then I worked my way up to an engineer. These are all things that are going to pay you significant sums in the future. and I mentioned this before in a previous episode, but knowing how to tailor that resume, that's incredible. I absolutely love that the Air Force does that for you guys, that it uses acronyms and terminology that is a direct correlation in the civilian workforce. And I honestly wish that more military branches would do that, because for us, being in aviation, our options were technicians, the worker bees, right? Quality assurance, or group supervisors, project managers, essentially, but we didn't carry that title. So yes, you have an abundance of experience in those fields, but unless you know how to translate that terminology from military terms to civilian terms, it's going to make it a lot harder on you when you exit the military, and it's going to be harder to establish yourself. So the Air Force, right off the bat, saying, hey, this person is an engineer. A lot of people listening to this are like, well, yeah, if you're an engineer, you have to go to school for this many years. Yeah, okay, that's one option. But there's tons of people I work with now in the aerospace industry who do have military backgrounds, who were exposed to various things in engineering, yet they didn't get that degree that says, hey, I'm a mechanical engineer. But I guarantee you they can do the exact same thing. And these companies that are hiring, they realize that and they accept it. When I got my job, I had all this experience in quality assurance, and I had experience doing engineering investigations, working with companies like Sikorsky and their technical representatives. So these are all things that I learned on the job that people are paying to get an education for. And I'm not saying that's bad. I think that's great. But what I'm trying to get you guys to understand is maximize everything that you can from your military service. Learn how to start making those connections as soon as possible. So if you guys are start talking to people on the outside, hey, this is my current job, this is what I do, and have them help you transcribe it into something that a civilian employer will be able to read and understand. So that's number one. And I'm sorry to go on a rant, but this is stuff that I think people absolutely need to know if they want to be successful and start off on the right foot, because it's hard out there. Just because you have all of these things and have all this experience doesn't always mean you're going to be successful. So that was the first thing, is them setting you up with the proper terminology and teaching you guys, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it just sets you up. One thing that I wish that they would have taught us: when you get out, this is more valuable, this is what you want to put on your resume, because you have all these experiences and it's really hard to condense it down to a page or 2 pages. So that was the other thing that hearing you talk is really cool about the Air Force. What are your thoughts on that? Now that you are out and you've been out for 2 years, what are things that the Air Force did for you that kind of gave you either a leg up on the competition or at least equalized the playing field?
What you talked about, having the titles definitely helped. The knowledge and skills, all the training that we got definitely helps. As an aviator, the training that I got there pretty much led to the job that I'm doing now. And the aspect of what I do now is very closely related to what I did as a flight engineer in the Air Force. Except now I don't fly on airplanes. I help to dispatch and plan flights, which is the ground aspect of what a flight engineer does. But I think the separation class, it helps you get ready to get out, building your resume. I think if one thing that I would have done differently getting out was focus more on my resume. I had a plan. That plan fell through. And then that's kind of what led to how I kind of went through the year or so after I got out, before I decided to use my post 9/11 GI Bill and go to training to get a FAA license. What they teach you, I think, in any military branch can definitely be transferred over. And you also need to explain that sometimes to employers when you're going through interviews.
Right. And during your time in the military, you have an abundance of things that you've been a part of. As lower ranking E1 to E3, all the way up to E5, there's going to be times where you are the one acting as a group manager, a supervisor, and you are literally in charge of tasking an entire workforce to go accomplish a mission. On the outside, and this always bugs me, but again, this is my own personal thing, it bugs me when I see that these requisites for manager level positions is you need to have a bachelor's degree with 8 years of experience in personnel management or you need to have a master's degree. And for me, I'm like, well, I don't have a master's degree, but I have a proven track record of leading X amount of people, both military and civilian, to fix, maintain, and deploy helicopters all over the world. And that's just one part of the job, aside from communication security, aside from quality assurance. So you get exposed to so many different things while you're in the military that it is a blessing. But if you don't know how to word it properly in your resume or when you are sitting in front of an interview board, it could shoot you in the foot. So that's why Sean and I are mentioning these things. Make sure you guys are doing those things now, because like he said, his plans fell through and there was a gap in time where I'm sure you were stressed out completely. And with having a family and having children, I could only imagine how stressful it is. The earlier you guys start taking advantage of these tools, whether it's the transition courses or networking and asking other people who have already separated what their experience was and what they did to be successful, that's going to help you guys. It's not going to make it foolproof by no means, but it's definitely going to help you guys further yourselves in your advancement.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because a individual that I worked with in the training squadron, he reached out to me on LinkedIn. He's like, I see that you're a aircraft dispatcher. Can we chat? I want to see what it's like and what you do. He's approaching his time to get out. So just using your outside resources, people that that have gotten out before you did and are in a similar job that you want to do, definitely reach out.
Right. You just said it. Family. Like you said, your buddy called you and asked you for help, and you were more than willing to help him, just like I'm sure he would be willing to do the same for you.
That brotherhood that you get and sense of purpose can go away when you get out of the military if you don't have that plan or things lined up.
Right. You said things didn't quite line up when you first separated from the military. Do you think that it was because you didn't have enough backup plans, or you just weren't educated on what it's like to be a civilian? What do you think made it so difficult when you first left the military? And for people who are listening now who are struggling and, maybe standing in your exact same shoes, what do you tell those guys about setting themselves up or trying to mitigate some of that fear?
So when I got out, our plan was we had bought a Airstream travel trailer. We were going to travel around the country as a family, and I was going to work for this company. And about a month or so after I separated, the owner of the company sold the company. So at that point, I was like, well, now what am I going to do? We were trying to renovate our Airstream at my in-laws. Don't really know what I'm going to do for income sources. That was super stressful. I got a wife, 2 kids. So it's like how we're going to get through this. And I was supposed to line up to go into the Air Force Reserves, but the recruiter didn't process the paperwork. So at that point, started a business with my father-in-law, which obviously didn't work out very well. And then one thing led to another, and I went to school to get an FAA license as an aircraft dispatcher, and led to where we're at now.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. So with you sharing some of that insight and some of the things that didn't work out, what do you tell people now? If someone comes to you and is saying, hey, Sean, thinking about getting out of the military, what do you tell them to make things a little bit less stressful?
So I would tell them, have a plan and then have a backup plan, and just realize that things do happen. Have a network of people, whether that's your spouse, whether that's your family, whether that's people that have gotten out of the military before you or that are still in the military, and use them. I failed at that, and I fully admit it, that when things did hit the fan after I got out and had no idea what I was going to do, I completely withdrew, stopped trying to communicate, and that's the worst thing you can do. You have to be able to talk to somebody, because that will just take you into a place that you don't want to go, and it'll wreck you. Thankfully, I did open up and did really get her involved, and that just helped moving forward. We both saw starting the business wasn't working and that we needed to get out. Where we were wasn't a healthy place for either one of us.
Yeah, and I know it's hard, especially coming from the military, and probably even harder for you having some family that was in the military. I'm sure that you always felt like maybe it was large shoes to fill and you didn't want to ask for help, but no one gets to where they're at without the help of others. So utilize that network. Make sure you guys are paying it forward. After you've been helped, make sure to try and help one or two other people so it continues. But definitely that's huge. I think that's the only reason why I've even made it to where I'm currently at. Actually, I know for 100% fact that's why I am where I am now. It's because there were people that looked out for me. So yeah, thanks for saying that. One last thing that I kind of wanted to get your take on, because I know I've been bugging you for quite some time, but you said you came from a Marine Corps family and, your dad talked you into joining the Air Force. Obviously, each branch has pros and cons. It does certain things differently. What are things specifically for people who are listening to this and are thinking about joining the Air Force, whether it's a program, a benefit? What are things that are specific to the Air Force that you think make it unique and would make it something that you want others to take advantage of?
Big reason why I did join the Air Force was the overwhelming aspect of the aviation side of it. Having the ability to be able to see the maintenance side, being able to go to the operations side. A lot of people don't see both sides of the house, and seeing that aviation is in my blood, which I figured out later after I'd separated and wasn't in aviation. You can't take it out of you. But for people wanting to join the Air Force, if you want to see the world, sign up and go into aviation. Be an aviator.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, if someone asked me today who does aviation at the highest level and who opens up the most doors, yes, I'm extremely biased and I love the Marine Corps and I will always say my branch is the best. But when it comes to just the network and the education that they give you guys, the Air Force, in my opinion, does aviation at a much larger volume than any other branch. If people disagree, that's fine, but you can't argue that. Who else has a space command? Who else is involved with NASA, with SpaceX? No other military branch. It's just the Air Force. For you guys who are thinking about joining the military and you feel like aviation might be for you, Sean said it, I'll say it, the Air Force is a tremendous opportunity for you guys to grow, get an education, and open up doors in the future. And that's what it's all about, using everything that you do as a stepping stone for something larger. Or maybe you reach a certain point where you're happy where you're at. That's good too. But I'm glad that we got to share this conversation, and hopefully some of the guys and girls listening to this will think about the next steps, whether they're planning on joining, whether they want to make the military career and they're currently in, or whether they're looking to separate, making sure that they have everything lined up and set themselves up the best possible. And if plan number one fails, at least they have multiple backup plans. One last thing that I like to do every time we have a guest on the show is I like to open it up with one piece of advice. What is one thing that you want people to take away from this?
Getting into any kind of training session you can while you're in the military is amazing. It just adds that next layer to your resume. And then once you do get out, learning how to turn your military lingo into civilian lingo is by far, I think, one of the hardest things to do.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Education, take advantage of every training session, every certificate program. It's going to pay itself tenfold. And it's crazy to think that, but the better you're able to market and sell yourself, the better income you're going to bring in, the better position you're going to get. So yeah, I could not agree more. Those two are extremely crucial in setting yourself up. Thank you so much for bringing those things up. And honestly, thank you for coming on board, being a part of this and telling your story.
No problem. Thank you for having me on and what you're doing. It's amazing to listen to every podcast and see different sides of the house.
Thanks, buddy. For all you guys that tuned in, if you guys need help with resumes, transcribing some of that terminology, please feel free to email us. Great news is we've been working hard to set up our foundation. Our website will be up and running in the next 2 to 3 weeks, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening to The Unwavering. please rate and comment on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star and a great comment, and we may just read it on a future episode. Also, follow us on social platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Be sure to check back with us next week.